Trey Hendrickson is back with the Cincinnati Bengals and ready to play in 2024.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Today, we get into Trey Hendrickson's return to Cincinnati for the offseason program and quite a few comments to Jeff Hobson, to the rest of the local beat, including James Rapine, about his return to the team and what happened with his trade request and his frustrations. We'll dive into that topic today. We got a peek at the Bengals schedule. We know who they're playing in week 2, taking a road trip to Kansas City. And it's a packed show, James. The Bengals also practiced on Tuesday, and we've got some practice takeaways for you. Joe Burrow continuing to throw, Amarius Mims taking some first-team reps. Today's show brought to you by Game Time, where you can save $20 off your first purchase of tickets with promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Terms apply. And let's start with the return. Trey Hendrickson back. He spoke with you. He spoke with Jeff Hobson for Bengals.com as well yesterday in 2 separate instances of Trey Hendrickson meeting with the media, which is actually somewhat noteworthy because Trey doesn't often speak with you guys.
Rare. And that's actually where I want to start. I want to give Trey some props because I wasn't sure he was going to talk on Tuesday. And so the fact that he did after talking with Jeff Hobson on Monday, I think he deserves credit for that because he didn't have to, and you never have to. And I think part of it is he wanted to address everything that has gone on over the past month and really everything that had gone on in like a 48-hour window where everyone sort of was stunned, shocked, and then kind of reacted the same way and was on the same page. I don't really know of any media member, and not just on the Bengals beat, but in general or fan for that matter, that thought Trey was going to get his way and thought that the Bengals were going to trade him. We kind of looked at it and shrugged like, you just signed a contract extension. And I think that's what's interesting about where Trey's at is there was nothing else he could do. Now, did he have to show up this week? No. And I think he does deserve credit for that because it is voluntary. And I think he wanted to show the Bengals, show his teammates, show everyone that he is in. And there's probably part of him that mentally wants to be around his teammates because that's the part of it that helps him get past the business side. There are 2 sides, and I talked to him about this. Obviously, the locker room side and the business side. And this team has done a hell of a job at not letting the business side impact the locker room. And Trey Hendrickson is the latest example.
And he was asked straight up, do you regret signing the extension? His answer was no.
I have the quote. You want me to give it to you?
Yeah, read the quote.
No, my goal was to play here longer. When they offered me a chance to play for Cincinnati for another year, I took it. I would take it again. Maybe he wants a 1-year extension.
I mean, he wants security. That was the theme. That's where his frustration comes from. He talked about the explosion of the edge market since he signed his deal. He is frustrated with his pay ranking among his peers, considering how well he's produced, especially as a pass rusher in the last couple of years. And I get that. But he said things that I think will really get himself back into the good graces for fans. And judging from the replies, when I pointed out some of these quotes on Twitter before they were able to see some of the video from the locker room today, fans are all in on Trey Hendrickson. Like, man, I was a little bit annoyed with that trade request, but I'm going to have to go get a jersey now. How can you not love Trey Hendrickson? Like, those were the kinds of replies to people reading these quotes. Like, this is where separating business and the team is difficult. At what point am I contradicting what I want long-term, winning games? All those things are what I want to do here in Cincinnati. Removing myself from the team doesn't help the team. And then he goes on to give credit to all of his teammates for helping him achieve his production. He concludes with, my mindset is to win a Super Bowl, and I think we've got the quarterback and the pieces to do it. I want to be here a long time. I want to win football games, and I want to bring a Super Bowl to Cincinnati. He also credited the front office and said they do their job well. They were transparent, respectful throughout the process, and they dealt with him straight, right? And so when you get praise for the front office, talking about being here a long time and winning Super Bowls, talking about putting the team first. I mean, that's like some fan fiction stuff almost, right? Not that Trey has any leverage here. And so, there's that aspect of it, but saying, you know what, it doesn't help the team for me not to be here. It doesn't help the team for me to retire. I'm under contract. I got to put football first. I mean, that's what fans wish T. Higgins was doing right now, right? Like, yeah, let's go win a Super Bowl. Let's be on this value contract and show up for voluntary stuff that I don't have to show up for. If T. Higgins did something like Trey Hendrickson just did, everyone would love it, right? And so I think that's why this is such a popular move for Trey Hendrickson to come back after he's realized that this is what's best for him. And he also said, yeah, he's going to play for the Bengals in 2024, as if there were any doubts. I think it all lines up with some good reactions to an initial questionable strategy from Hendrickson.
And that's the value of talking. People didn't know in with Trey, you only know so much of Trey anyways. It's not like he talks a ton, and he acknowledged that on Tuesday. But it was smart of him to talk. I showed up not late to it. I was in the another part of the locker room, but Trey had already talked for multiple minutes when I got there, and I talked to him for at least 7 minutes. So you're talking at least double-digit minutes, and it continued after I had stopped recording as well. So it's beneficial, and that shows it because of the fans that are in on Trey Hendrickson and all of those things. And yeah, I think the element of him potentially getting some bad advice after signing an extension, and then 9 months later, you're like, very rarely is that going to work out to that level. Now, deep down from a business side, does he regret signing that extension? I'm sure from a business side. I also think he's happy in Cincinnati, and we know that firsthand. And you're right. It would be awesome if these things would resolve themselves by the player saying, hey, that's it. But as long as, and this is a reminder to fans too, because when player X wants a trade, it isn't personal. It doesn't mean that he doesn't love you and cheering you on as you rock the Jesse Bates or T. Higgins or Trey Hendrickson jersey or whoever it is. But there's a business element to it, and it can get uncomfortable. And so T. Higgins training in Miami and not here, that's okay. It's part of the business. And the good thing, and I think overall team-wise, it is really unique where this doesn't disrupt the day-to-day. And I know Bengals teams in the past, it would disrupt everything. It would, and not just Bengals. NFL teams all over deal with this, and a lot of them handle it much, much worse. Let it affect them. I never once thought this would affect the Bengals. And wherever that starts, whether you want to say it's with Joe Burrow, whether it's Zach Taylor, whoever, the culture is there. And I think that is a little part. He didn't have leverage, so that's the other part. But a little part of it is Trey's like, well, hell, what am I going to do? I want to be part of this locker room. I want to be part of this team, and I want to win. And I want to be one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Sitting at home training isn't as beneficial as being there. And so that's why I think he made the decision to come back.
It was certainly a pleasant surprise to get Trey back this week. Nice to see him working with the team again. And it was a bit of a surprise, although apparently he has been in Cincinnati working out, according to Jeff Hobson. Like, it's not like he's not been there. He just hadn't been visible with the team or any team published video or anything like that from practices.
Man, so we were supposed to take that. He's at Skyline on a Tuesday asking for a trade. I mean, Wednesday. That man was putting hot sauce on his cheese coney when his agent called Zach, like, or called Duke or Mike or whoever the hell he called, like, hey, it would have been Schefter, actually. Anyways.
Got Skyline on the mind. Coming up next, we got our first glimpse at the Bengals schedule. They're going to go to Kansas City and take on the Chiefs in week 2. Let's break it down coming up next.
Whether it's Bengals Chiefs on, well, the second week of the NFL season, or it's one of the multiple primetime games the Bengals are set to have, you got to get to FanDuel, because right now FanDuel is offering $150 in bonus bets for any winning $5 bet. So if you're like me and you thought the Thunder were going to come back against the Mavericks on Monday night, and you went to FanDuel and you've been using FanDuel and you throw some money on the Thunder, well, you cashed in like I did. Or maybe you haven't used FanDuel yet. You've heard us talk about it over and over and over. Well, this is your sign to get to FanDuel right now. Sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. And just like that, with your first $5 bet, once it wins, you trust your instincts. Maybe don't bet on the Reds because, well, they would have burned you recently. Then boom, $150 in bonus bets for free with FanDuel. And it's the NBA, it's NHL, obviously NFL future bets, all in one spot. All you have to do for the $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Bengals, Chiefs. Well, we knew this was a game that was going to happen this year. We knew the Bengals were going.
See, you don't sound excited. Come on. Bengals, Chiefs, week 2.
I'm getting there. I was going to build up to it, and now I'm not going to. But instead, it's a week 2 contest this year, and honestly, kind of like it for the Bengals in that game, getting them a little bit earlier. The Chiefs are a team that, not that I think they're ever bad or particularly vulnerable, but they're a team that definitely sorts through its issues throughout the year and then typically is better toward the playoffs. They've got that down. Andy Reid and the Chiefs do. Not saying that this is going to be an easier game or anything like that necessarily, but just because it's early in the year and the Bengals have had some rough starts lately, we'll talk about that theme here, I think. I don't think that necessarily spells disaster for the Bengals. It gets a tough road trip out of the way early as well, which is kind of nice in some senses, especially if they can get out to a hot start and win those games. It puts them in a good position for the rest of the year. What are your thoughts when you saw the Bengals are heading to Kansas City in week 2?
Michael Jordan had the flu game. Week 2 is a woo game. I'm putting it out there right now, Jake. You're already hating it, but I'm letting you know. If the Bengals go to Kansas City, Arrowhead Stadium, and handle business week 2, I don't give a damn what happens week 1, week 4, week 3. It doesn't matter. 425, Tony Romo, Jim Nantz on the call. Well, you got to woo, my friend. So that was the first thing. When you brought us back from that FanDuel, I was like, oh, it's a woo game. So, yeah, that wasn't the first thing I thought of on Tuesday morning. When that came out, the first thing I thought of was, all right, time to get the flight to Kansas City, because, yeah, this is one that, 1, you have to be at if you can. 2 is must watch. 3, thank goodness it's in September. I don't buy the people that hate the idea of the Bengals playing meaningful September football. That doesn't mean that they're going to go there and win, but I do think that playing the Chiefs in a 22-degree environment with swirly winds at Arrowhead Stadium, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with doing it in September and seeing what Kansas City is like when it isn't the dead of winter, which it's been the past couple of trips to Kansas City during the Joe Burrow era. The other element here is week 2 on the road. Dare I say that the Bengals will start the season at home? That sounds good to me. So whoever they play at home, you're going to feel good about, I think, going to feel good about their chances. And that if that does happen, and then week 2, you have a chance to get a game up on the Chiefs this early in the season. Yeah, sign me up for that, especially because the Chiefs, they aren't getting any favors. They have to deal with Baltimore. And yeah, they have the rest because they're playing 10 days later. But Baltimore, Cincinnati, that's a tough 1-2 to start with. So I like it. I like it a lot.
And it's probably, I don't remember the Chiefs' schedule in and out, but it's probably generally a tough schedule for the Chiefs. First place schedule and all of that. You're right. I think that the odds point to the Bengals playing at home in week 1. You take all the factors together. 1, we know they're playing on the road in week 2. 2, you look at what the Reds are doing. The Reds are actually away for weeks 1 and week 2 of the NFL season in 2024. They're back at
The
home.
Chiefs are the bottom of the NFL for strength of schedule.
Like the hardest or the easiest?
It's 2024 strength of schedule, opponent win percentage. Now it's just based on win percentage, but it's 502. Yeah, the Bengals is 502, so it's the exact same. So middle of the NFL. I'll say middle of the NFL.
I feel like that's got to be related to their division. Anyway, the Reds are at home in week 3. And so when you combine that the Bengals are definitely on the road in week 2, the Reds are not going to be at home in week 1, and they are going to be at home in week 3. You might see home, away to start the season for the Cincinnati Bengals. And getting that opportunity to play the Kansas City Chiefs early means, one, this better be the year for their sake that they get rid of this slow start issue they've been dealing with, whether that's because of Joe Burrow's health or whatever the reason is. And largely it is due to various weird circumstances that Joe Burrow has had to deal with since coming to the NFL. But if you get off to a fast start, that fast start could include a win over Kansas City. It also means that, assuming that our inclination that they are going to play at home in week 1 is correct, and it could be, week 2 could end up being week 3 could end up being a primetime game, so it doesn't conflict with the Reds being at home playing a 1:10 or 1 in the afternoon baseball game. But
the way they're playing, it isn't going to conflict with much, my friend. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, but the NFL does take that into consideration, right? So assuming week 1 is at home, which I would say 99% chance, just logically, they're at home in week 1. The possible opponents, when you eliminate the other games we know in week 1, are Denver, Las Vegas, New England, Washington, and if they do an AFC North contest in week 1, it would be Pittsburgh. And I would say that all of those are relatively appealing matchups at home in week 1 for Joe Burrow's return to regular season football for the Bengals.
And Drake May drops back to pass. He's looking deep. He throws it deep. And Dax Hill intercepts. All right, so I'm not Dan Horde, but you can see the vision for some of those matchups. Russell Wilson sacked again. Trey Hendrickson with 17 sacks in one game. All right.
And it's been a tough rookie debut for Troy Fautanu playing left tackle for the Steelers.
Are we sure he's not a guard?
That's right.
What happened to his career? It's like, yeah, let's move him to guard. Trey Hendrickson got him. No, I think it's exciting, and that's what's fun about having Kansas City week 2. I think you're going to have the probably home opener. Again, we don't know for sure. We're just speculating, but home opener is your season opener. So there's excitement there. And if they handle business against whoever, then it's like Chiefs on the road, chance to start 2-0, beat the defending Super Bowl champs in their house. And you can see how the fast start takes off and how the hype train, which we haven't really gotten. Like I get Burrow and Jamar, and that there's plenty of hype around the Bengals year in and year out now.
Not like last year.
But they haven't had the 4-0 start like the 2005 team, the 8-0 start like the 2015 team, where it's like, oh, they're number 1 in the power rankings. Even the Super Bowl year, they made a late season run. And that's obviously what they want to do. And I'd much rather be 2-2 in September if it means making a run in December and January. But you get the point. It would be nice if Bengal fever took over a bit, starting with their week 1 matchup in September.
Well, they had the hype going into the season last year. They won't have that level of hype this year. I don't think you're going to see nearly as
Calfgate kind of.
I mean, even with that, you had people like Robert Mays picking them to win the Super Bowl. You had Paul Dehner Jr. saying this is the year they're going to do it, and predicting it as a beat writer. And that's the only time that I can ever remember.
I don't think
he did.
Did he?
I thought he did. I thought he said he thought that was going to be the year. Maybe not. If I'm misquoting Paul, I apologize.
Yeah, the defensive tackle room said otherwise.
My last point about the schedule here, we're going to get the full schedule tomorrow, of course.
Yes, we'll have a full show.
Or today, depending on when you're listening, Wednesday
night.
We'll break it all down. But in 2023, each division in football played exactly one divisional game. And then there were a bunch of interdivision games in 2024. So that could point to a Pittsburgh Steelers week 1 game if you read it like last year's schedule, or they could do something totally different and they could just avoid the divisional matchups altogether. Coming up next, there was a practice for the Cincinnati Bengals on Tuesday, and Joe Burrow threw some deep balls. Once again, let's break down our practice observations to finish up the show.
Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the place you need to go to get your Bengals tickets. The schedule is almost out. Once it's out, go to Game Time, download the Game Time app today, and use code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Why Game Time? Well, there's a bunch of reasons. One, they have all-in ticket prices. So you don't get hit with a bunch of hidden fees at checkout. You know exactly what you're paying for. And they have a view directly from your seat, so you know exactly what it's going to be like when you get into the stadium to watch your Cincinnati Bengals, whether it's in Kansas City, whether it's at Paycor Stadium here in Cincinnati, anywhere in between. Game Time is the place to go for last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, and it's not just NFL. Reds, NBA playoffs, summer concerts. Game Time is the app to have. So get Game Time today by downloading the Game Time app, and with your first purchase, where you're going to get $20 off with promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL to take $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. LOCKEDONNFL. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Practice, James. Practice in May. Joe Burrow throwing deep balls, taking play action snaps. Marius Mims working at right tackle with the first team offensive line. Trent Brown wasn't there on Tuesday. What stood out to you the most as an in-person observer of this Bengals May practice?
The play action deep balls. There was a lot of them. Like almost every deep ball that was thrown was off of play action, which I love. I'm a big play action in the middle of the field. If you're near the Bengals B, I'm calling a play action deep ball. And I think it's because I was raised on the Carson Palmer, John Kitna to Chad Johnson connection, where they would always go play action deep in that part of the field. But that's what was happening. And whether it was Jermaine Burton, Shedrick Jackson, by the way, as we were recording this, Jermaine Burton signed his rookie deal with the Bengals. Eric All Jr. signed his rookie deal with the Bengals. So 2 more draft picks. Cedric Johnson was the other day, earlier this week. So 8 of the 10 Bengals picks have now been signed. But yeah, I thought Burrow looked solid again. And it was rainy. It was a little rainy, and was throwing with precision, was throwing accurate. Is he all the way back? No, I still don't think he's all the way back, but he's working through it. Stayed after. Other just quick notes. Eric All was working on the side with Nick Cosgray, had a brace on his knee. He's obviously still midway through the rehab process, or a little past, I guess, midway, but working, as was Tyson Anderson, DJ Ivey. So really good to see him working. And that's our first time seeing him do anything, because rookie minicamp wise, he was just off to the side. So good there. Other notes, Charlie Jones had a nice catch. He stayed after practice, was getting some extra work in. I'm trying to think of any other observations. Andre Yosavash wasn't there, so some extra reps for Shedrick Jackson was certainly noteworthy. But overall, it comes down to, and why are we always there for Joe Burrow? And we already talked about Trey Hendrickson, which was the other big note. He was at practice, obviously. So Joe Burrow continues to look good, and I think he's getting better and better.
Yeah, I thought that there weren't any clips that I saw, at least, that revealed the wobble occasionally that we talked about last week.
Wobble, baby.
Didn't see the wobble for Burrow this week. Showed off some good accuracy down the field. One play that was particularly nice was a post to Jermaine Burton off of play action. He also hit Burton on an outbreaker. It looked like a 15, 20-yard out that looked like a very accurate throw for Burrow. He hit Jackson on a vertical shot that hit Jackson in stride. So a number of deep shots that looked impressive, and the ball didn't wobble. Throwing off platform quite a bit as well. Dan Horde posting a clip of a slow-mo off platform throw from Joe Burrow when he's warming up. So looking good today was Joe Burrow, I thought. No commentary to the contrary from me today. And the last note for me that I noticed from practice was it was cool to see Amarius Mims and Orlando Brown working and talking about, getting out of the stance and talking technique. You go back to the episode where we talked with Brandon Thorne about the Bengals offensive line, and he talked about how much that opportunity meant for Amarius Mims to be able to learn from guys with similar size in Orlando Brown and Trent Brown to him, even though they both play and win in different ways, the two Browns. And so it was just cool to see them working as Frank Pollock was running the offensive line through drills. Brown and Mims were talking on the side, and Brown was showing Mims, something about getting out of the stance. And I enjoy seeing those moments where players are talking technique and honing on working, refining, and giving lessons outside of just the coaches running the drills.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think real quick, just while I'm thinking about it, I think Trent Brown missed for personal stuff, but it's voluntary. And so like Andre Yotsavash, not worried about him, not worried about Trent. Fine. As long as the personal stuff is okay. But I have no idea, by the way. And that might not actually be the case. That's speculation more than anything, but letting you know that guys can miss. But yeah, I think it's weird because if I had to say how Amarius plays like, I would say he plays more like Trent Brown than Orlando Brown Jr. I want him learning from both of those guys. I think Orlando Brown Jr. is as football centric as any human outside of maybe Joe Burrow in that locker room. And so do you want your first rounder learning from him? Absolutely. Trent, I don't know. I can't speak to that yet. But from a pass protecting standpoint, from an offensive line skill set standpoint, it's really easy to see the similarities. So it is a good landing spot. And I will say this, it was pretty slick to see him in 71 lining up with the starters, protecting Burrow. I know the numbers only mean so much, but they do matter. And seeing 71 at right tackle, no, I'm not saying he's Willie Anderson, but again, since I already mentioned Carson and Chad, hey, Willie was right tackle for the Bengals teams that I remember growing up the most. So it's pretty interesting there.
That's a good number for the Cincinnati Bengals. You mentioned Tyson Anderson was working on the side.
Yep.
Dan Horde
Looks
talked
good.
to him, and
no,
maybe you
no
did too.
No brace as he was. I talked to him. I didn't interview him, but no brace at all. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, Dan mentioned that he expects to be ready for the start of training camp. That would be awesome for him. Mentions that he was playing at a Pro Bowl level as a special teams player when he got hurt, and would be a boon for the Bengals, who need to figure out, as they do every year, which guys are going to be their main special teams contributors. So nice to see him moving well and progressing well with that ACL rehab. It would be great to just see him stay on the field. He's dealt with some bad injury luck and was a player that, when they drafted him, was a pretty exciting player for how he was going to fit into his role with the team, and he hasn't gotten to do that for a full season yet.
And he was good. He was good in the preseason last year, had the 2-interception game. And he's someone, he is like the Geno Stone. There are some similarities there between those two guys where they were low picks. I don't think Geno had the injury stuff that Tyson has had, but worked their way into it. And then you look up and they end up being really good players. I'm bullish on Tyson. I think he's a good player. So hopefully he can stay healthy.
Yeah, agree there. I think that's it for our practice notes.
For now.
From
Until
Tuesday.
We check the tape, baby. Until we check the tape.
And we might have some more on Thursday. Wednesday, of course, we get the schedule. And we will break down the schedule.
We're going to get a woo from Jake. Oh,
and
schedule woo.
We'll count the primetime games. We'll count road trips and rest and all that stuff. And we'll have that breakdown for you tomorrow right here on Locked On Bengals. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.